Hi, I'm Quentin Schulte, and I would like to share with you 8 reasons why our communication today is so conflicted. Conflict, division, nastiness, verbal cruelty, a lack of understanding of one another. This takes many forms, but we all know that today communication is not in very good straits. Earlier today, I was talking with someone who said that she does not like to tune in any TV news because people are arguing so much. Everybody's in conflict with everybody else, she said. It's terrible. It increases her anxiety, so she just turns it off. And then I was talking with a colleague who teaches college. I taught college for many years, and he said to me, one of the difficulties that he really has today is going into a classroom where students don't want to open up and talk. They don't want to discuss because they're fearful that they'll get hurt, that others might put them down, that there will be significant conflict. We live in a time when there is a lot of conflict, and not the kind of positive conflict that necessarily leads to a good outcome, but negative conflict that tears us down and wears us out. Well, I want to set the context for a later video that I will do on 10 practical ways that we can improve our communication, reduce negative conflict, and create positive conflict that helps us in our relationships, both privately and publicly. But today, what I'm going to do is to look at these 8 reasons why there is so much negative conflict, that our relationships, our communication are so conflicted. So here we go, 8 reasons. Number 1, weakening cross-generational relationships. Weakening cross-generational relationships. I remember when I was growing up in Chicago and my older brother, 9 years older, got a car and would go out meeting with his friends. And that car took him out to places where he could meet with his friends. He sometimes had to take me along because I was, the little brother, and he was babysitting for me. And I could see them getting together like at a McDonald's parking lot and talking with no adults around. They were forging their own kind of culture. And then they would listen to their own music, WLS in Chicago, the top 40. So the media were providing a kind of culture for that generation. And the automobile was enabling them to get together with other adults around. And that set off a kind of pattern that we now all have inherited, where technologies have enabled us to create these youth cultures that change quickly. We used to think of a generation as 20 years. Now you have 2 siblings, maybe 5 years apart, in the same family, listening to different music, watching different movies, a different group of friends, communicating among themselves in their own peer group, disconnected from parents, from grandparents. There is less and less communication cross-generationally, and more communication within a narrowly defined generation. This makes it more likely that there will be conflicted relationships and conflicted communication. Number 2, increasing personal distress. Increasing personal distress. We all live with a lot of personal distress today, not just stress, but distress. As my psychiatrist taught me, when stress gets out of hand, it can lead to distress, a kind of negative response to stress where we become more anxious. Our anxiety increases. Maybe even our depression increases. We fear communicating with other people, opening up to other people. We want to shut down, close down. We're worried about what other people will think. Will they shame us? Why not just climb inside ourselves and not communicate, or if we do communicate, fail to open up with others, not tell them what we really think or what's going on more deeply. All kinds of distrust in our society. Number 3, declining trust in leaders and institutions. Declining trust in leaders and institutions. So today, compared to, let's say, 50, 60 years ago, people are much more likely not to trust the institutions and the leaders of those institutions that are part of their lives. For example, political institutions and leaders, or business institutions and leaders, or educational institutions and leaders, churches and church leaders. Growing distrust all around us, and we all feel it. It's a real thing, and we have to contend with it. For instance, in the institutions we're part of, how do we communicate in a way that builds trust rather than creates more distrust? So, declining trust in leaders and institutions. Number 4, spreading out the imitation of dysfunctional communicators. Spreading imitation of dysfunctional communicators. We all tend to imitate other communicators. It starts when we're very young, and we imitate parents, siblings, and then teachers when we start school. We are creatures of imitation, and our communication is no different. This is a problem when we are around people who are dysfunctional communicators, who might be nasty, who might be poor listeners. We take on the way the people are around us. And when there's growing dysfunctional communication in society, we tend to become that way too because of the people around us. Even when we are not thinking about it, we're not trying to be like other people, but we become like them. I remember years ago, I was writing a book on the media in particular. One of the things was soap operas and how people were becoming like soap operas, and even naming their kids like the names of people on soap operas. And with situation comedies, people were practicing the one-line put-downs in sitcoms. And so interpersonal communication was becoming more like the communication on sitcoms as people imitated what was going on in situation comedies. And that's still true. We are spreading the imitation of dysfunctional communicators in our society. Number 5, deepening political conflicts. Deepening political conflicts. Do I really need to say anything about this in today's world? All kinds of communication in politics is just awful. Among different political parties, within parties, among different political leaders. Oh, it's awful, awful, awful. And in the media, people talking negatively about politics and certain politicians. And then one channel bashing people from the other channel of TV. And it's all over the place. And it's not just in the political arena. It's wherever there is political type communication. So if we take churches as an example, churches are partly political institutions in the sense that there may be differences of opinion about how the church should function, what it should believe, how it should go about its business. You know the issues. If you're involved in a church at all, there are issues of conflict. Some of them have become legendary now, like differences of opinion over how to worship and worship music, other topics. Wherever there are differences of opinion, politics is there, people jockeying around to get influence, and increasingly the communication about these differences of opinion becomes political in a dysfunctional sense. The communication is not good. Number 6, accelerating media propaganda. Accelerating media propaganda. When I say propaganda, you're probably thinking about somebody trying to get somebody else to believe something that's not true, spreading falsehoods, untruths. I'm not talking about just that. In fact, I'm not talking primarily about that. I'm talking about a kind of media propaganda that's designed to increase audience size by telling people what they already believe or what they want to believe. Confirming what people already believe or want to believe. Feeding them whatever messages will please them. Get them to read a newspaper, to tune in a radio broadcast, to view some type of podcast or video cast, to watch a particular television network or show. It's media propaganda designed to confirm what people already believe and to increase that, regardless of what's true or not. This is the kind of media propaganda today that becomes so damaging because it just feeds us in our own little in-group and makes it more likely that we will have difficulty communicating with people with different views, different beliefs, different practices in their lives. And so if you look at TV news, for example, you see very clearly it's divided up now according to different groups that have different values and beliefs and different political orientation, different feelings about who's a good person or a bad person in the news and in politics. And the divisions are getting worse. Accelerating media propaganda. Number 7, declining social interpersonal skills. Declining social interpersonal skills. This is kind of ironic in a way because we live at a time when we have more communication technologies than ever. And you would think it would be improving our communication to have all of these technologies at our disposal, but it's not exactly the case. Interpersonal, one-on-one, or maybe small groups like 3 or 4 people, in those situations, communication is actually getting worse because our skills are declining. And this is especially true with younger people growing up in the high-tech age. We know from the research now, for instance, that people graduating from college are much more likely to be uncomfortable with going out for job interviews. And they will have more difficulty figuring out how to prepare socially as communicators for a job interview. We know that young people have more difficulty calling up somebody on the phone and having a conversation with them. They would prefer to text. The phone makes them uncomfortable. They're not prepared. In my field of communication studies, we talk about code changing. In other words, moving from this group to that group and learning how to communicate differently in different groups. Well, that's increasingly problematic today. It is true that interpersonal communication skills are declining in spite of all of the technologies that we have at our disposal. So number 8, growing technological obsessions. Growing technological obsessions. Now, I mean this in 2 senses. One is we're obsessed with having the latest technologies because we think that those technologies are necessarily going to improve our communication. Got to have that latest phone. I've got to have that pad. I've got to have that computer. I've got to have that app, that software application. As if those will necessarily improve our communication. So we're constantly going after the latest means of technological communication, even though we have not mastered those means yet. And maybe we shouldn't go on to the next ones. we are obsessed with having the latest technology. But we're obsessed in a second way too with the technologies, and that is we feel like we have to be connected all the time. We have to have that phone with us. We have to have particular apps open. We have to look at that phone a lot. We have to see what's going on in this social medium or that social medium. What's going on? What's going on? I got to be there. Don't know what to do if I'm not connected. We're obsessed. And this makes it more difficult for our communication. All of our communication gets spread in little bits and pieces, and we become less able to be thoughtful about how we communicate. We're more likely to get into trouble. Technology does not necessarily improve our communication. Our obsessions with technology get in the way. So these are 8 reasons. Let's take a look at these together here. The 8 reasons that our communication today can be so conflicted: weakening cross-generational relationships, increasing personal distress, declining trust in leaders and institutions, spreading imitation of dysfunctional communicators, deepening political conflicts, accelerating media propaganda, declining social interpersonal skills, and growing technological obsessions. Now, when you look at these 8, I hope you get a sense of which of these most applies to your situation in your own interpersonal relationships, at home, at work, or maybe in your public communication. Whatever situation you're part of, I think you'll see that some of these are more connected to your life and need to be addressed. So in the next video, I will in fact address the 10 ways we can best kind of improve our communication so we have less negative conflict and can more positively develop relationships with one another in our personal and public lives. If you're interested in more reading on this right away, let me show you here this. I've written quite a few books, but 2 of them in particular that address these things: Communicating with Grace and Virtue, and the other book, An Essential Guide to Interpersonal Communication, An Essential Guide to Interpersonal Communication, which I co-authored with my colleague Diane Badzinski. These 2 books will help you a lot. They're not expensive. They're widely available. And you can also go to my website and sign up for my email updates and read various things that I'm writing about improving our communication. The website is www.QuentinSchultz, Schultz with an E on the end, QuentinSchultz.com. So what I've tried to do today is to offer the context. 8 major things that are happening all around us that are negatively infecting our communication, like a virus, and leading us to be more and more conflicted in our communication, causing conflict, spreading conflict, being part of the conflict. And then in the upcoming video, I'll share ways that we can, in fact, create more grace and peace in our communication. I hope this is helpful for you. Again, I'm Quentin Schultz, available to serve you in any ways that I can. You can contact me through my website too. Thank you so much. Peace to you.